Alright, Title 7, Equal Credit Opportunity Prohibit the discrimination reason for the adverse action. The issue of the unlawful with the credit of the discriminate given the applicant with respect to the aim of the expect aspect with the transaction on the basis of the race, color, the religion, the national origin, sex, of the marital status, of the age provided by the applicant, capacity of the contract. 2, because all of the part of the applicant with income to derive the aim of public assistance program. 3, because the applicant with the good faith of the exercise of the right owner with the consumer credit protection shall not come to the discrimination purpose of the title of the creditor with the make of the inquiry with the marital status of the inquiry with the purpose of insertion. Credit rights, remedies to the applicant with a particular extension with credit not to the discriminated determination of credit worthiness to make with the inquiry with the applicant and with the applicant income with the derived of the public assistance program. So for the inquiry and purpose of determination of the amount probably continue with the income and level of credit history with the other pertinent element with the credit worthiness provided with the regulation with the board. Use empirical to derive with the credit system with the conservative age within such system with the demonstrate the statistically sound in accordance with the regulation of the board. As if the operation of such system with the age of the elderly applicant that may not be assigned with a negative factor or value, or to make an inquiry with the consider the age of the elderly applicant with the age of the applicant to be used with the creditor with the extension of the credit favor to show the applicant with the no violation section with the credit with the review with the extended with the credit with the offer pursuant 1 any credit assistance program expressly authorized by the law of the economically disadvantaged class of the person any credit assistance program administered with the non-profit organization with the members of the economically disadvantaged class or person or any special purpose of the credit program offered to the profit of making the organization that makes special social needs, which means stand prescribed with the regulations of the board and refusal to require the made pursuant to the program written for 30 days so no longer the reasonable time with specified the regulation board for the aim of the class of the credit transaction after the receipt of the completed application from the creditor shall notify the applicant of the application and with each application against the adverse action to take within title with the treatment of the reason such action from the creditor of the creditor satisfied with the application, providing statement of the reason of the written matter of the course of the applicant against the adverse action with the take with the given written notification of the adverse action for the disclosure of the applicant right with the statement of the region within 30 days after the receipt of the creditor requires within 60 days after the notification of the identify the person or officer for the which for the the statement that was made the the statement that may be given orally with the written notification provided by the applicant with the right to have with the statement of the reason with the confirmed in writing on the written request. A statement of the reason for the meet for the requirements of this section only could they contain the specific reason for the adverse action taken. The credit with it has been requested the third party with the maybe the special extension of credit directly and indirectly with the applicant with the notification statement of reason required with the subsequent and maybe directly or such the credit indirectly through the third party provided with in either case that identified with the creditor is disclosed. Requirement of paragraph 2, 3, or 4 of the may be satisfied with the verbal statement of the notification in the case of any of the creditor who did not act for the more than 150 applicants determine the calendar year preceding the calendar year with adversely action taken and determined with the under regulations of the board for the purpose of subsection determined adverse action means denial revocation of the credit changing when determined existing credit arrangement with the refusal grant credit with a substantial amount of substantial terms requested. Such terms does not include the refusal of the additional credit under the existing credit arrangement with the applicant with the delinquent otherwise in default where such additional credit would be exceeded previously established credit limit. The definition for the definition rules and construction of this fourth in this section ample for the purpose of the term. Applicant means any person who would apply for the credit in the direct for the extension of the over the renewal of the continual of the credit would apply for the credit indirectly with the existing credit plan for amount with exceeding previously established credit limit determined the board before the board of the government and Federal Reserve. The term credit means with the right granted by the creditor to the debtor for the deferred payment of the debt and incur of the debt for the deferred for the payment of repurchase for the property service as the deferred payment thereof. The term creditor means aiming for the purpose of the regular extent with the renew for the continue with the credit for the person with the regularly arranged for the extension for the renewal for the continuation with the credit for the assigned with the original credit with the participate with the decision extend with the renewal with the continued credit. Term person means with the national person with the corporation with the governmental subdivision agency trust of the estates with partnership with the cooperation association. Any reference to any of the requirement imposed within the title with the provision thereof with include with the reference regulation of the board under the title with the provision thereof with in question regulation. The board shall prescribe the regulation care for the purpose of the title of the regulation may contain but not limited to the classification differential for the other provision may be provided with the title of the adjustments of the exemption for the aim of class transaction and judgment of the boards for the necessary to properly effectuate the board effectuate for the purpose of the title for the prevent circumvention of the variation thereof the or to facilitate substantiate compliance therewith. Particularly such regulation may exempt the one or more of the provisions of the title any of the class transaction not primarily personally family household purposes. If the board may express finding of the application of such provisions would not contribute substantially to the carry out of the purpose of the title of the regulation should be prescribed as soon as possible after the date of the enactment of this act, but there's no event later for the effect of the date of this act. Board shall establish the Consumer Advisory Council for the advice of the council, consult with and execute the function of the Consumer Credit Protection to provide with the consult with concerning other consumer-related matters that may be delayed for the performance of the council for the appointing of the members of the council board shall seek with the chief of the fair representation and interest for the credit of the consumers for the council shall meet with the fine time at the call with the board with the members of the council for the not regulated full-time employee with the United States of the child with attending a meeting such for the council for the entitled to receive the compensation of the rate fixed by the board not exceeding $100 per day with it including travel time such members may be allowed to travel expense with incurred with the transportation substances while away from their homes or for the regular place of the business. 704 Administrative Enforcement complying with the requirements imposed within the establishment of the enforcement of the Section 8 Federal Deposit and Insurance Act for the case of the National Bank with the control of the currency and members of the Bank Federal Reserve System and the other national banks of the board and the banks insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, member of the Federal Reserve System Board, Director of Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Section 5 of the Homeowners Loan Act of 1933, 407 of the National Housing Act, Section 6.1, 17 of the Federal Home Loan Banking Act, Federal Home Loan Bank Board, either directly through the Federal State of the Loan Insurance Corporation, case of the institution subject to any of those provisions, Federal Credit Union Act of the Administration of the National Credit Union, Administration with respect to the Federal Credit Union, the Act for the Regulator of the Commerce, the Industry of the Commerce, with the Commission with respect to the aim of the Common Carrier Subject the Act of the Federal Aviation Act of 1958, with the Civil Aeronautic Board with respect to the air of the carrier, foreign air carrier subject to the Act, Packard Stockyard Act of 1921, except the provided Section 406 of this Act, by the Secretary of Agriculture with respect to any of the activities subject to the Act. The Farm Credit Council for Credit Act of 1971, Farm Credit Administration with respect to the Federal Land Bank, Federal Land Bank Association, Intermediate Credit Bank with the Production and Credit Association, Security Exchange with the 1934 with the Security Exchange Commission with respect to the broker and deal with the Small Business Investment Act of 1958 with the Small Business Administration with respect to the small investment compliant companies. B. For the purpose of the exercise of the agent referred to in subsection A of the powers under the Act and referred to in subsection violation A of the requirement of the imposed with the owner of the title shall be deemed with the violation requirements imposed with the owner of the Act. Addition of the powers under the provision law was specified referred to the subsequent. Each of the agency referred into that subsequence may exercise for the purpose of enforcement complying with the requirements imposed under the title. Any authority conferred in and by the laws exercise of the authorities of any of the agencies they referred in subsection A for the purpose of enforcing complying with any of the requirements imposed with the title shall in no way preclude with the exercise of the authority for the purpose of the enforcement complying with any of the provision law with not relating with the prohibition of the discrimination on basis of the marital status with respect to any of the aspect of the credit transaction. Except for the extent of the enforcement of the requirements imposed with the title with the specifically committed with the other government agency, the other subsection Federal Trade Commission, the enforcement as such as the requirement, the purpose of the exercise of the Federal Trade Commission for the function powers of the Federal Trade Commission Act for the violation of the requirement imposed with the title shall be deemed violation of the requirement imposed with the owner of the Act. All of the function power of the Federal Trade Commission on the Federal Trade Commission Act are available to the Commission enforcement complying with any of the person with the requirements imposed with the owner of the title respectively whether the person engaged with the commerce meet with any of the jurisdiction tests. Federal Trade Commission include with the power to enforce the Federal Reserve Board regulation promulgated with the title within the same manner with the violation has been violation of a Federal Trade Commission trade regulation rule. The authority of the board is to issue regulations over this title does not impair the authority of any other agency designated within section make rules respecting its own procedures, enforcement compliance with requirements imposed on this title. Relation 705 relations to law, state law requests the signature of both parties of the marriage purpose for the creating a valid lane, passing creating title, waiving the cohabited rights of property, and assigning and airing earnings shall not constitute a discrimination under the title of the provided. However, the provision shall not be construed as permanent if the credit is able to take the material status into an account with a connection with the evaluation credit worthiness of any applicant. Consideration applications of state property law that directly and indirectly affecting credit worthiness shall not constitute the discrimination for the purpose of the title of the provisions table of the property, the separate and consumer extension of the consumer credit each of the party of the marriage shall not apply any case of the will of each of the party of the marriage voluntarily apply with the separate credit of the same creditor for the provided any of the case of the state law for the sole of the preemptive of each of the party of the marriage shall be solely responsible for the debt contracted. When each of the party of the marriage separately with the voluntary apply with the opportunity with the separate credit accounts with the separate credit with the same credit with the accounts shall not be aggregated otherwise combined with the purpose for the determined personal financial of the personal loan with the skillings on the any of the state of the under the or over the United States with the same act of the mission and consistency of the violation of the title of the applicable state law with the person aggrieved such contact by bringing legal action and gave recovered monetary damage for the either under the title of the under such state law with the but not in both of the election remedy indemnity shall not apply with the court action in which relief sought, if it does not include the monetary damage of the administrative action. The title does not annul the alter and effect with the exemption of the person, so the provision of the title of the complying with the laws of any of the shape of the respectively credit discrimination exempt to the extent of the law of the inconsistent with the aim of the provision of the title, not only with the extent of the inconsistency the board is authorized to determine in which so the inconsistency exists, and the board may not determine with any of the state law of the inconsistency with any of the provision title of the board determines such law to give the greater for the protection of the applicant of the board shall regulation exempt the requirements section 701 and 702 title any of the class of credit transaction with any of the shape of the determines if the under lawful statement as class transaction subject to the requirements substantial elements similar to those imposed under this title of the laws give the proper protection of the applicant there is adequate provision of enforcement. Failure to comply with any of the requirements of the title of the state law of the transaction expected shall constitute the violation of the title for the purpose of section 706. 706 Civil liability. Any creditor failed to comply with any of the requirement imposed with the title shall be liable to grieved applicant when the actual damage of the damage of the applicant either acting individual capacity of the member of the class and any creditor of the government with the governmental subdivision agency failed to comply with any of the requirement imposed with the title shall be liable to grieve the applicant for punishment unit of the damage of the amount not greater than $10,000 additional actual damage provided in subsequent A with the exception of the case of the class of the action total recovery under subsection shall not exceed lesser of the $500,000 1% of the net worth of the creditor of the determinant of the amount of the damage of the action. Court shall consider the amount of the relevant effect of the amount of the actual damage award of the frequency, persistent and failure of the complying with the creditor reach over the credit and the number of the person adversely affected with the extent which creditor failures complying with the was unintentionally upon applicant of the aggrieved applicant of the property of the United States of the district court any of the other court competent jurisdiction may grant such equitable declaratory relief that are necessary for the enforcement of the requirements imposed under the title. In the case of any successful action under the subsection A, B, or C with the cost of the action, together reasonable attorney fee for determining with the court shall be any of the damage of the reward awarded to the court under such section. No provision of the title of the imposed liability shall apply with the act of the gentleman admitted for the good faith of the conformity with the official rule, regulation, and interpretation thereof of the board with the conformity with the interpretation and approval of the official with the employee with the Federal Reserve System with the duly authorized for the board to issue the interpretation and approval of such procedure for the board may prescribe thereof the notwithstanding after the title of the mention occur with the title of the rule, regulation, and interpretation and approval of the domain with the presiding determinant judicial other authorized to invalidate or any reason. Any action under this section may be brought with the property of the United States District Court without regard to the account with the amount with the controversy within the other court competent jurisdiction. No such for the action shall be brought later than 2 years from the date of the occurrence of the violation, except there one the agency have the responsibility of administrative enforcement under section 704 commencement of enforcement proceeding within 2 years of the date of the occurrence of the violation. Whenever the Attorney General commences for the civil action under section over the 2 years of the date of the occurrence of the violation, then the applicant has been the victim of the discrimination with the subject. Such proceeding civil action may begin action under the section no later than 1 year after the commencement of the preceding act. The agency has responsibility to administer the enforcement in section 704 and unable to obtain compliance with 701 authorized to refer to the material of the Attorney General with the recommendation of property and civil action instituted. When a matter is referred to the Attorney General pursuant to subsection G whenever they have the reason to believe that one or more creditor that gave the pattern over the practice of violation from the title of the Attorney General may be given bring a civil action in property of the United States the District Court with the relief of the property including the injunction relief. No person agree with the violation on the title of the violation section 805 Civil Rights Act 1968 shall be recovered under the title of section 812 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968 violation of the base on the same transaction. Nothing in this table that contribute with the prohibit to discover the creditor's credit rate granting stand with the prohibit to discover the proceed with the court of the agency in which the action proceed is brought. 707 the annual reports of Congress no later than February 1st of each for the year of the 1972 of the Bank of the Attorney General with the prospectively make the report of the Congress concerning the administrative function. This included of the recommendation board of the Attorney General respectively deemed necessary for the property in addition to each for the report the board shall include the assessment of the extent which compliance requirements of the title is being achieved with the summary of the enforcement action taken by each agency assigned with the administrative enforcement responsibility under section 704. 708, effective the date of the title is in effect with the expiration of 1 year after the date of the enactment of the amendment made for the Equal Credit Opportunity Amendment Acts of 1976 shall have taken effect with the date. Enactment thereof shall apply with any of the violation occur with on and such date after the amendments made in section 701 Equal Credit Opportunity Act shall take effect 12 months after the date of the enactment. 709, title, short title, the title may be cited as Equal Credit Opportunity Act. And alright, this is basically your credit card consumer protection acts and other acts.